So if you look at the amount of change in the human genome or any species over the last 100 years, other than things that like things that just reproduce so rapidly, like some insects, but like any mammal over the last 100 years, there's been really no gene change. But the rate per capita, the rate per person, the amount of chronic illness per person since the end of World War II, but even again since 1900, say, right, has gone up exponentially. We have more cancer per person. We have more diabetes. We have more obesity. We have more ADHD. We have more autism. We have more digestive issues. We have more infertility. We have more impotence. We have more anger. We have more depression. We have more anxiety. We have more murder. We have more, all of the things you can think about that would talk about illness. We have more chronic illness problems now per person, not just more because we have more people in the world. We have more per person than we've ever had ever in history. So we know that chronic illness is rising rapidly, but we know our genes have not changed at all. So it's not possible that the rapid increase in the amount of chronic illness can be due to genes, because genes have remained constant, but our change in our illness rates has increased exponentially. So therefore, there must be another variable that's responsible for the change in chronic illness rates. And that is very simple when you do the work. It's lifestyle. The changes in how we eat, move, and think track exactly to the increases in chronic illness. And I might add another point. The people who have the wrong lens have had more money and have prescribed more drugs per person every year for the last 75 years. And they haven't been able to change the increase in chronic illness. So that system's not working.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is we can impose a third variable or factor on these graphs that you're charting here. Of one is the increase in chronic disease over the last several decades. And the other one is genetics. Genetics aren't changing. It's a flat line. Chronic disease is rapidly increasing. It's skyrocketing.
Rapidly.
And we can also add in the layer of modern medicine and advancements in technology, the number of pharmaceutical drugs that exist, all of the trillions of dollars that have been poured into research and development of pharmaceutical drugs for all of these various diseases, and all the other technology. And you chart that, and the graph goes up dramatically, just the same, in the same exact direction as the chronic disease rates do. And what that, in other words, what I'm getting at for people listening is that it's not that, hey, as we have more drugs and more medicine and more advancements in all these conventional medical paradigm technologies, medical interventions for diseases, that all of a sudden the chronic disease rate is flatlining and starting to decrease as a result of it. It's still going up. And in fact, in children especially, we're seeing, I think the statistics, it's like almost 50% of kids now have some sort of chronic illness. And it's kids are getting sicker and sicker, adults are getting sicker and sicker. And this should be obvious, what Dr. Chestnut is saying, that there must be some other variable that is explaining what's going on. And it's lifestyle, of course. And yet we still are educating physicians, MDs, with receiving virtually zero education in nutrition or lifestyle, which is the main cause of over 80% of the chronic disease burden.
Their interventions are very limited. It's a drug. It's a test, which isn't an intervention. It's just a test to figure out what they're going to give you. But their interventions, right? Their solutions, so-called solutions, are drugs, surgery, or chemotherapy. Right? I mean, that's it. That's all they have in their scope. And they've been so successful in convincing people that anything outside of that isn't real science, isn't real healthcare, is kind of quackery, and is alternative. It's the exact opposite. If you look at, so sometimes I think for people, the reason they don't get this right is because they don't. The biggest part for me is, if once you see yourself as an animal species, then you can start to talk common sense. So I always say to people, look, imagine back when the Great Lakes in the 1970s, right? And the fish in the Great Lakes started washing up on the shores with cancerous tumors on them. And the birds that were eating those fish, their eggs were going brittle, and they were going, they were becoming a danger or going extinct. Would anybody in their right mind say, well, clearly the problem here is genetics? These fish all dying all of a sudden and increasing chronic illness in the fish and the birds, it must be genes. Something must have gone horribly wrong with all these genes in these animals to be dying and going in danger. Nobody in their right mind would say that. But even more so, if I said to you, well, the solution is to dump drugs into the lakes and to set up little hospitals on the side of the lake, so when these sick fish wash up, we can give them drugs and surgeries. And clearly that's the main thing that we must spend all our money on, is treating these sick fish rather than trying to find out the cause of why they're sick, because we know the cause, it has to be genes. And when they wash up, we're going to give them, we're going to dump chemotherapy or radiation or all these drugs. Everyone will go, you got to be in it. If you said that at a biological conference, if you said the way you were going to save a species in biology was, if you said that the reasons any species is going endangered or becoming sick with chronic illness, and by the way, just so we're clear, humans are the sickest species in the history of Earth. We have the sickest kids, we have the sickest teenagers, we have the sickest adults and the sickest seniors and the sickest babies in the history of any species on Earth. To be clear, but if it was any other species, who in their right mind would say it must be bad genes? Right? The reason those whatever species on Earth is going extinct must be bad genes. Never. But it's because we've been so brainwashed into seeing ourselves as something magical. We've been able to be taught that we're defective, that the reason we're sick is because we have a defective gene and we can't self-regulate our own blood pressure or cholesterol or moods or sort of blood sugar, that we have to have somebody else give us a pill to override our defective system so that we can get a good score on a blood pressure test. It's all complete, utter nonsense, provably false in 5 seconds. I'd be happy to debate 50 people who think they're experts in health that have the other paradigm and want to give people more drugs to solve these problems. And what happens when people get a drug? Do they get better? Do they take the pill for 3 months and get better, or 2 months, or 1 month, or 6 months? No, they get on this pill because they're told they're defective, and they stay on that pill for life, and they add more pills with time. They cost more money and get sicker every year. But we take those same people and change their lifestyle. What happens? They get off the pills and they get healthier.